His ears began ringing as the pain radiated around his lower abdomen. His hand felt the area becoming coated in a warm, thick liquid. Shock took over his mind, and he absent-mindedly reached into his pocket and began to pull out the locket. Another shot rang through the air, hitting him again in the stomach. With this, his fingers pulled out the trinket the rest of the way and closed the heart shut. What's up, guys? Welcome to the second episode of my Sisters SyFy, where I read short fiction and sci-fi stories from grassroots authors just like you. Today's story deals with a post-apocalyptic world and time travel. It was submitted to us by David Conkey, who also happens to be my brother. So again, I hope I do this story justice. If you enjoy the story, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and rate. It would greatly help us out. Without further ado, here's Dystopian Heart. Shots rang through the air, causing Avery to shoot up from his bed, interrupting his much-needed sleep. He walked over to the wall, peering out from a hole caused by the decaying drywall and wood, noting that the shots seemed to be coming from a few blocks over. This event, unfortunately, was nothing new to him, and realizing he wasn't going to be getting any more shut-eye for the day, he started to get ready for his day to come. War, violence, and bloodshed was all that Avery had ever known. The decline of society happened 80 years prior, when the citizens of the United States realized that change was never coming, so they rose up, executing those in charge, and attempted to put the power back in their hands. Unfortunately, in doing this, many became enamored with the newfound freedom, and decided that the violence shouldn't stop. This caused many of the people within the country to perish over the years, leaving nothing but rubble and waste in their path. After throwing on his clothes and donning his Kevlar vest, Avery slinked out of the one-story shack on the hunt for more supplies to get him through the week. This had become his routine. Wake up, search the buildings of the surrounding areas, take any resources he could find, and go home to sleep the night before starting all over again. For the most part, he was lucky, rarely running across any of the other residents of his chosen town of Ducksville. And the few times that he had, he was either able to barter his way out of the situation, or quick enough to dispose of the other party. Over the last few years, he has checked most of the buildings in a 3-mile radius, thus causing him to venture out further to find anything useful. After walking for an hour, he came across a cul-de-sac he hadn't raided, so he ventured towards the first house. Upon reaching the outside, he tapped on a window twice and called out to any potential inhabitants. He had developed this tactic after starting to search houses, almost meeting his end to the business side of a Winchester shotgun. After waiting a few minutes and hearing no noises from the inside of the house, Avery carefully climbed through one of the broken windows. Once inside, he surveyed his surroundings. The window he had entered through had brought him into a living room. Around him were couches with rips and tears in the upholstery. Bookshelves on their side and papers and trash littered the floor. He quickly got to work, picking through the remnants of anything of value. Going room to room, he was able to acquire a few cans of food, a bucket, a new knife, and some rope. Feeling pleased with his findings, he started towards the door to leave. As he passed the hallway threshold, a shiny gleam caught his attention from the corner of the wall that stopped him in his tracks. Kneeling down, he reached out and grabbed the small item. Turning it over in his palm, his eyes scrutinized all the nuances of the small metal heart-shaped locket. He rubbed his thumb over the outside, removing the dirt that clung to it in many spots. He noted the damage to the casing, spotted 3 large indents just below the clasp. Curious of what the old owner used it for, he released the clasp, sending the heart open. He was surprised to see that the inside housed no pictures, just glass panes on each side of the half. Lifting his head back upwards, he nearly fell over at the scene before him. The house he was in mere seconds ago now had reverted to its pristine condition. All of the windows were intact. The furniture that had been previously tattered now presented an inviting comfort, and not one book was out of place. Startled, he ran towards the door, wanting to see what awaited him. As his eyes settled at the doorstep, he noticed that there was a newspaper that had previously been resting on the door. He picked it up frantically and gasped as he read the page. It was the same date. He was torn from the paper as he began to hear footsteps approaching him from the front. Looking up, he had seen a relatively harmless-looking woman walking up. She smiled and gave him a small wave. "Hello, you must be the new neighbor that just moved in recently." "What is this place?" he asked anxiously. She gave him a quizzical look. "It's Ducksville. Are you okay?" She looked him over. What happened to the destroyed buildings and all the other damage from the uprising? What uprising, she asked, slightly stepping back away from the clearly troubled man. He realized that he was still holding on to the locket, so he went to close it and place it in his pocket. As soon as the glass panes touched, everything before his eyes transformed to the bleak surroundings he was used to. The woman had also disappeared into the bleakness, leaving him standing there alone. He gazed down at the locket in bewilderment. He knew that nothing in the situation made the littlest sense to him. He was sure that it was the locket that was responsible for everything weird that has just happened. Still trying to keep his grasp on his sanity, he decided to start back towards the house. He longed for a sense of the only thing that gave him a feeling of normality. As he walked back, he pondered the mysteries held within the metal of the trinket secured safely within his pocket. How was it able to change the reality he seen before him? Was it magic? Was it delusion? Had he been losing his mind? The date had been the exact one as the one he currently found himself in, but the woman didn't seem to know anything about the uprising. The same one that had transformed the landscape into the treacherous one he had known his whole life. He tore himself from his thoughts as he noticed that he had made it back to his house. As he entered through the door, he noticed some of the items were now out of place. A noise coming from the back room tore his eyes away from the items scattered on the floor. Slowly, he walked towards the noise, ensuring to watch his step and not make any additional noise to his movement. Rounding the corner, he spotted a man digging through the drawers of the stand that rested next to his bed, no more than 20 feet away. He raised his gun, training it onto the back of the man. "What are you doing in my house?" he growled, attempting to take control of the situation at hand. The man turned slowly, quickly spotting the gun. A panic overtook his face. Without saying another word, the man started charging at Avery. Realizing that this may turn out horribly, Avery swiftly threw his hand into his pocket. As soon as his fingers felt the cold chill of the metal casing, he grasped the clasp. In an instant, the man would have made contact. The locket was thrown open. He tightly closed his eyes and braced for the inevitable impact. He stayed in that position for a moment, still waiting for what his brain knew was coming. This is when a sound near him made his eyes shoot open. "Hello? Can I ask what you're doing in my house?" asked the man's voice. Looking around, the house had taken an immaculate appearance. The walls were once again whole, and the room was lit with a wonderful bask of light from the fixture above. "Hello?" asked the voice again, this time in a more irritated tone. He finally spotted the man standing in the corner with a phone in his hand. It was then Avery realized that he was holding a gun pointing forward, so he hastily lowered it and placed it into the holster at his side. "My apologies, I mean you no harm," he stated in an apologetic tone. "I just need to get out of here." With this, he began to turn and walk towards the door. "You're not going anywhere. I've called the police and they will be here shortly." He hurried towards the door, unlocking it and turning the handle. As the door opened wide enough for him to see out, 3 police cars sped into focus with the cops exiting the vehicles and running towards the door. He attempted to slam the door shut, but wasn't quick enough. The cops burst through, sending Avery staggering back a few steps. As they entered, Avery seen that each of them had their guns drawn, all pointing at various parts of his body. He took a step towards them, one of the officers yelling at him not to take another step. Wanting to get himself out of this unscathed, he tried to explain his situation and took another step. His ears began ringing as pain radiated around his lower abdomen. His hand felt the area becoming coated in a warm, thick liquid. Shock took over his mind as he absent-mindedly reached into his pocket and began to pull out the locket. Another shot rang through the air, hitting him again in his stomach. With this, his fingers pulled out the trinket the rest of the way and closed the heart shut. Just as this happened, the locket fell from his hand, hitting the hardwood floor with a large cracking sound. He slinked down against the wall, picking the locket up. Opening it, he seen that the glass panes had shattered. Looking around, his surroundings lay in ruins. Realizing he was back in his own doorway, as the shock and adrenaline began to wear off, his pain began to set in. He looked at his stomach where the blood was cascading from the 2 entry wounds. Consciousness began to escape him. All he could think about was how he would never be able to explore the beautiful landscape of all what now seemed to be like a passing dream within his head. As the last of his life was draining out, a shadow passed in front of his vision. He realized that it was the man that had been in the house prior to using the locket. The man had a bewildered look on his face as he stared at Avery. He bent down and picked up the heart, walking out the door as Avery's vision went black.